Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Susan. Yeah, doing well.
Good. So, quite an interesting time, I imagine, for you as a team building organisation over the last couple of months.
Yes, you could very much say that. Yeah, as a company that specialises in bringing people together and having fun, it's not been on top of the agenda for most, or not even been allowed to do it. So yeah, it's been quite frustrating, really, I suppose. But a learning curve, and we have to sort of adapt to move on. That's the key.
So, did you have a lot of cancellations and postponements to start off with? Was that kind of initial focus?
Yeah, well, we had a busy March with events, and as the news kept breaking, so did the policies on companies' policies. So, literally a week before they said no, I don't see it as a problem. We're still going to go ahead. And the next day it would change, and the next day it would change, and the next thing they're cancelling and postponing and so forth. So towards the end of March, I think we did one event in March where we were expected to have 100 people there, and there were 30 because everybody was uncertain to what was going on. I think that was our last event, which we did in Wales. From there, everything else started cancelling, and and carried on being cancelled or postponed to next year.
So, coming from that situation, what have you done to adapt your model and what you're able to offer?
Well, initially, I think everybody thought, well, actually, if there's no way that we can go out in the next 2 or 3 months, so if you take sort of April, May, especially the need or the perception of need was the fact that they need that corporates will do virtual events, so virtual conferencing. So why travel everywhere where we need to bring people together, deliver a message? We want them to have fun. So virtual events, if you like, and dare I say a Zoom quiz, as the sort of thing that people would probably start thinking that's what they need. But quickly, and it's amazing how quickly everyone has adapted to using Zoom, hence we're talking today like we are. But Zoom quizzes and everyone else thinking, well, and funny enough, there are so many Zoom quiz experts out there now that I think anybody that talks about another Zoom quiz is probably going to be their last. So I think virtual events probably will be a part of the future, but I don't think that they're not going to have the legs or the demand as we all first thought.
No, and so have you, during the sort of April, May, June, have you run events for corporates and done them in the virtual world? Have you managed to adapt things that you were doing before so that they can work online and aren't a quiz?
Yes, we've done a few, not as many as I thought we would, but the one that we did successfully. I mean, we did rehearse it and practice it before we actually put it onto to the company. But we ran a game show, which was you're still in teams, but the idea is that you have to interact within your team, based on a very popular TV. Would I Lie to You? Was the same principle. So you get to know people a little bit, whether they're telling the truth or whether they're lying, and having some fun on the way. And actually, the way that we built up the momentum of it, everyone was in fancy dress when they're on the screen. You had individual chat rooms and so forth, and then you obviously had the compare, bringing them all together and highlighting the funny parts, if you like, and getting everybody involved. So it's just about name checking and getting people to talk to each other, which is the secret of putting a good event on, albeit it does need to be a little bit more controlled with the mute button a bit more often than I think that my compares at the moment would actually say that's brilliant. If only we had a mute button all the time. But that's the point of a live event, I guess.
So. Zoom etiquette is a new thing, isn't it?
It's a new thing, yeah. And don't eat when you're being on a Zoom, and don't be careful what you're wearing.
Yeah.
All those things.
How are things looking for you now, as events are obviously still not on the government's roadmap in terms of any timelines, but one feels that they must be next, as hospitality opening is looking like it is going to be the 4th of July. So how are you approaching things now?
Well, I think there's two sides of it. I think the first side is that we need to be respectful for what the social distances are, and it doesn't really matter what the government are saying. It's what companies are going to be more comfortable delivering or asking staff to do. I mean, in the first instance, companies are still asking staff if they're prepared to come back to the office, and that's the sort of questions that are being asked at the moment, with the view that they're not going to be forced to go back to the office. They can carry on working from home because this uncertainty, and there's those people who are a bit more risk averse than others, and therefore you need to be able to sort of be as encompassing as possible to keep your staff engaged. And staff engagement is the whole key to this industry. We can basically, a good event will basically keep staff engaged, having fun. And if you're having fun and enjoying yourself with people that you work with, then generally you're going to have a much tighter producing team of people, which is inevitably what all companies want. So to answer your question, what I'm thinking is at the moment is that there will be an element of virtual. So we're talking, what's the latest thing is sort of hybrid events. And with hybrid events, basically what I'm meaning is that there can be an online element, so people don't feel ostracized but still be part of a team. And that can be coming all sorts of different guises, whereby on the event you can have someone with a camera or GoPro, and a team of people could be sitting at home, being given a task, whether it's to disarm a bomb or escape a room or find the codes to get from A to B. All those sort of things can be done at home in front of a screen. But likewise, you can also have people doing a live event at the same time, doing the same sort of thing, but they're actually in a field, literally in a field, doing the same puzzles, obviously with social distancing in mind.
Yeah, I guess for you, the fact that, especially with the weather being as it is, you can host a lot of what you do in outdoors, which I think will make people feel slightly more comfortable when they are brought back together again, so long as this beautiful weather that we're currently experiencing lasts.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, really. I mean, the idea, we were saying back in March that actually all the research showing if you're doing an event outdoors, you're so much unlikely to get the virus because you're outdoors and it's all fresh air and everything else. So I think people, even in October, November, unless it's really, really bad weather, we've run events outdoors and people just get into the spirit of it. And you're dressing warm enough to you're not dressing inappropriately and so forth, and you're not exposing people to long walks on the moors and skinning rabbits and those sort of things. You can still have quite a lot of fun within the elements of going outdoors. So I think the outdoor events will continue to be stretched out without really the weather not playing a major part in what we can do. Because you can be out there for an hour or 2 hours. You don't necessarily have to be out there full days.
No, sure. And they do say, don't they, there's no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes.
Badly dressed, yeah.
It's true, yes. So previously, what were your most popular team building events, and are they things that you think you'll be able to adapt into that kind of new hybrid world that we think we're going to enter?
I think, yeah, I mean, there's a few things that that we were doing a lot of, and it was very much like the TV, you'd see on the TV, things like Taskmaster, Crystal Maze, the Crystal Booth, catching all the tokens and so forth. I don't see that going to be the easiest thing to bring back in. So that will probably end up changing that to a photo booth or something on those ilk. But there are what I call traditional activities which still have got legs that people have not necessarily done, but still very popular. Things like axe throwing, for example, there's been a big surge of people asking for axe throwing. And for the very nature of the task, you've got social distancing in place already. So axe throwing, archery, all the sort of shooting activities, for example, will all demand that sort of distancing in the first place. And as long as the equipment's being cleaned down after each round, you can have a group of people moving from one to another, and whether that's going to be different tasks, different sets. So you could do an element of indoors and outdoors if you are going into the winter months, but essentially a lot of it can be done outdoors, keeping people separated out, but still being part of a team, keeping group sizes down to sort of 6 as a minimum. I think those are sort of things that can be, well, to be fair, we could actually do that tomorrow, but it's whether that's actually what people want to do and companies wanting to do that.
Sure. And so have you seen this period as a time to be creative and looking at how you host team building?
Yes.
Ideas that
Yeah.
come from it.
Well, I think one of the things I'm never short of is ideas. I think are not necessarily always good ones, but the idea is there is always ideas out there. But what's the frustrating side is that, you know, we talked about hybrid events, for example, and one that I've just been working on is one. Basically, we're talking about time is of the essence, based similar to an apprentice, where you've got one group of people working on creating a new perfume or a new aftershave, and part of that team is one of their team is members of, or two or three of the members in another room, or could be somewhere else in the country, actually putting a film together for a TV commercial, where you have other people in another room or another part of the country or on screen writing the TV script and someone else doing the marketing. And you can basically have a multi-purpose event all taking place. All has to be done in 3 hours or 3.5 hours. But the essence of these events is that, and these team building or team development days, is that how people communicate, and whether they communicate well. And as we've all probably, those who've actually watched The Apprentice and screaming and shouting, saying, I think I can do a better version of that. It's great to be able to give those people the opportunity to go, well, here's all the materials, here's all the expertise, time is ticking, go. So I can see a few of those things, doing more of those things, not necessarily all in one place. And so business games, fun business games and so forth, again, is something that's going to happen.
No, that sounds great fun. And as you say, it doesn't matter where you are, it's because it's all about the communication. Yeah. And I guess it's looking at those skills. And is that what team building is about these days? Sort of communication and problem solving through communication, rather than some of the things that I recall when I was in the corporate world, which didn't really seem to show my ability to play in a team or not.
Yeah, I think the history of team building is, it was generally, if whatever the phobias are out there, let's try and see if we can break them. So if you know, people are scared of water and heights and spiders and everything else, and inevitably a lot of these team building things were, well, we're going for a long hike, then you're jumping off a cliff, and then you're going to skin a rabbit, and all the phobias you could mention were basically listed. And that's why I think everyone had bad name. Team building was a very bad name. But team building, essentially, you could take that word away and it's all about communication. So if you can communicate well, then obviously what happens as a result, you know, we have different departments not getting on. The amount of briefs we've had from offices not talking to other offices, and it's because of a stroppy email, or wasn't a stroppy email, it was just a badly written one or badly worded email, can start lots more problems in a company than actually picking up the phone, which more and more people are less likely to do. Therefore, if you go and practice and you're going to go and do events where it's a necessity to be able to talk to people, and if you're having fun at the same time, it just builds those bonds and builds those relationships and makes communication a lot more easier.
Yes,
so team building is communication, and that's it's just another word, I think. But the last year, and I've talked about staff engagement, but staff engagement is also much about the well-being of your staff. So it does come into, you know, there is a position in Barclays called Head of Wellbeing, and I've talked to him, and he had this title. He's responsible for 100,000 people of Barclays employees. And I said to him, well, when did you get this title of Head of Wellbeing? Thinking it was obviously a new thing. He said, well, 6 years ago. I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, I didn't really know then, and I'm not entirely sure now. The idea, I mean, he's very much about training and communication and people talking to each other. But the well-being of staff is having a purpose and knowing that you've got a place in life. And in a company environment, if you've got a core purpose and you know what your task is, you get much more sense of well-being because of that very reason. It's those who don't have a task or haven't made it unclear where they stand, suggests that their mental health is going to have an issue with that. So
yeah, and I guess that given what we've all experienced and are still experiencing with teams working from home, that well-being aspect is probably going to be something that many companies are really going to be focused on when they can bring people back together again.
I think without a doubt you've got that online setup, which is still quite two-dimensional as far as I can see. You don't necessarily get all the facial expressions. You don't necessarily get all that human contact, if you like, whereby you can have a laugh. There's so many Zoom meetings, if you like, just for example, how many awkward silences are there, and how many less times do people actually have a proper belly laugh? It doesn't really happen. Even if you know them well and so forth, it happens rarely, which you will get when you're doing face-to-face. So a well-being event, whether you call it a team building event or a well-being event, the idea of bringing an event in where people will actually have a lot of fun, and that I think is going to be the characteristic. And I also think the idea that things like festivals, Glastonbury weekend is this weekend, so many people where we are in the West Country absolutely devastated because they work. A lot of my instructors work Glastonbury, absolutely gutted that they can't be part of it, and it's a real mental issue because people can't do festivals.
Yeah.
So the idea that you could take a company and say, well, why don't we have an activity which could be something like inflatables or a sports day or a village fete, and then the evening is sitting around a fire singing songs and basically chilling. And that I think is probably going to be something that a lot more people will do, because you're ticking quite a lot of boxes. It doesn't all have to be full on, let's all run around a field for 3 hours. You can do a bit of that, but you can also have a little bit of just chill time and just sit there and soak in the atmosphere.
That sounds perfect to me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's been really nice to talk to you, and it's good to hear that that you're thinking about the future, and that that communication aspect of bringing and well-being of bringing teams together again. There's plenty of opportunity, and hopefully being able to make the most of this nice weather again at some point.
Absolutely. No, it's been an absolute pleasure, Susan. Thank you very much for the invite.